All right, welcome back. It's now 2025. We've been stupid busy for the whole last year. That has been basically since we posted a video. There's a huge backlog of footage, so we do have videos that should be coming out hopefully soonish, if things ever slowed down. This is going to be a quick and dirty video, not a ton of editing to do, but I wanted to share this with you guys. This is a new tool that should help with a project that hasn't been introduced on the channel yet, that is taking a while. This should expedite a big part of that project, make it a lot easier to get this done. And this project involves heavy gauge sheet metals, mainly 14 and 18 gauge steel. This is some 18 gauge. We've been using some 14 gauge. It's really difficult to cut is the current issue we've been having. Up until now, I've been cutting all of it with either these just roofers tin snips. They're great for the thinner sheet metal, like your 20 and 22 gauge sheet metal, but it really just wears you out cutting a lot of the 18 and 14 gauge. And it doesn't actually even really cut the 14 gauge. You have to get the die grinder out with a cutting wheel on it, and that's just really time consuming to go through that. So $100 on Amazon will get you supposedly a very cheap little plasma cutter. So we're gonna see if the cheapest plasma cutter I could find on Amazon is actually any decent. It turns out it's a box in a box. So like I said, this was, at the time of recording, it was $100 even. It was like $99.99, so like $106 after tax. Claims to be a 55 amp plasma cutter. Runs on both 220 to 240 volt and 110 to 120 volt plugs. So it's supposed to come with an adapter to drop down from the 220, 240 volt plug to the 110, 120 standard American house electrical outlet. It supposed to come with a torch and a regulator, so we'll just see what we've got. So there's a 12-month warranty according to this card. So might do that later, might not, we'll see. It comes with the user's manual with both Chinese and English, so that gives you a whole lot of confidence. Oh wow, that's quite the manual. Let's see. So it's an inverter plasma cutter to get the arc. High frequency pulse width modulation, DC current, yeah, So, for context, I've never owned a plasma cutter. I've actually never even used a plasma cutter. I know the basics of how plasma cutters work. So there's our adapter from the, this is an, I assume it's a, what is it, SEMA, S-E-M-A, N6x50R receptacle to a N515PD. So standard American house plug to, I believe this is the standard for dryers. It's the same receptacle as our 220 outlet here that is was installed for the welder. We've actually been running a heater off of that receptacle recently because it did actually get pretty cold down here. So it comes with some tubing. This should be for your compressed air inlet. The plasma cutter uses the electricity and a flow of compressed air to create the plasma and direct it into the metal. This is the cutting torch. It does come with a nozzle, a tip, a ceramic cup, and a couple of wire guides. I don't know if you can really see those. They're supposed to be like a standoff for the cup. And it does already come with a nozzle and a cup installed on the torch. So I'm just gonna pull one of these guides out and leave the rest of that in the package. Alright. So there's our torch. That actually seems like a decent amount of cable. So we've got, I'm guessing one of these is a control line. Yeah, this should be our control line. I'm not sure what this blue wire is for. And then the other one should be this compression fitting should be your airflow and the positive terminal. I believe this is electrode positive, torch positive, and the clamp is actually a ground negative. Love that styrofoam sound. Right, so this is the actual unit. It's very light, but it's not like suspiciously light, because it is actually fairly small. So it doesn't, I will say it doesn't feel super cheap, just in terms of like quality. It doesn't feel fabulous. The plastic's not trimmed the best. It's got a little bit of flashing around the edges of the handle, but overall, like it does not feel like they cut every corner they could cut. So that gives me some confidence that this may actually work for a little while. So I'm just gonna set that down, actually show you the controls on that. So ground clamp uses a DENS connector for welders. That's your air for the torch, which did come with a cap over it, so that's nice. Make sure nothing got in there. This is your switch contact. This says VIV arc. I'm guessing that's for our blue cable on the torch, and that's probably, I guess maybe it is actually electric current comes out of that port and isn't integrated with the torch airflow. So that's interesting. You got an air gauge on the front, both metric, it's megapascal and PSI. And then I'm not sure what the S is, but A is amperage. Again, I'm not familiar with plasma cutters because I've never used one. I suppose maybe that's post flow for air, is how long the airflow stays on after you let go of the trigger. But I'm not sure, so I might actually have to read the manual and figure that one out. It does come with a ground clamp. Fairly heavy gauge wire. This feels like maybe 4 gauge, maybe 6 gauge. 16 millimeter. That's interesting. Not sure what the metric to English conversion is on that. Clamp's nothing special. Good spring pressure. It does have the copper webbing on the inside of it, so good contact. The sheet metal that the clamp is actually made out of feels very lightweight, very, very cheap. But overall, I mean, you spend $100 and you get all of this. So that's, in my mind, that's not so bad. Assuming it works. And then I think last but not least in this package, you get, this should be an air regulator. So it does have integral air pressure control. Should just mount on the back of the, okay, I'm gonna have to cut the other end of that open. Actually, alright, so it comes with some Teflon tape. I'm sure that is the cheapest roll of Teflon tape you can get in the world. Then I'm gonna set that torch over there. We're gonna hook the rest of the stuff up on the front. Then we'll get our regulator set up and plumb in some air. Now I do already have the compressor charged up, and one of the things that I did not see on the Amazon listing for this was what kind of CFM your compressor needs to be able to supply in order to run this. So I'm hoping that's something I can find in the manual to share with you guys in case you at home do not have a massive 80-gallon air compressor like we have here. We have it because we knew we were going to be painting, and it was going to be nice to have an actual two-stage, full-size air compressor for doing paint work and sanding for body work, all that kind of stuff. But that's overkill for a lot of people's use cases, so I'm hoping I can find that spec in the manual here and let you guys know what that is. So if you're at home and have a smaller compressor, like a 3-gallon hot dog compressor or something, and you're wondering if you can run a super cheap plasma cutter setup like this, you will know for sure one way or the other. And actually, if I can't find it, we might do a video later, because I want to keep this one kind of short and sweet. But we might do a video later. We do have a smaller compressor that we could try running this with and just see kind of what our duty cycle and usability is. And maybe we'll do some later testing to see what the difference in the 220 and the 110 input range is, and how thick a material it'll do a clean cut through. Does it actually live up to the does it live up to the specification they list? I think that would be interesting to see. So if that's something you guys are interested in, just let us know. We'll try to make that happen. Back of the machine, you've got a power switch on off. There's a push to connect fitting. There's a barbed fitting. There is a bolt that's listed as an electrical ground, which is interesting. There's also 2 studs on the back that have nuts on them. So you can slide those nuts off and then slip this little bracket for the air regulator on there. And I might regret this decision, but I'm gonna bolt the regulator and moisture trap onto the back of the machine before I do all the plumbing, so that the machine can kind of hold the regulator in place while I'm attaching the rest of the lines. So there's these are labeled as an outlet here. This should also be an outlet, although it's not labeled as such. And then the other side here is labeled as in. So we'll have to put a quick connect fitting on the inlet. I think there's a barbed fitting for the outlet to the gauge. Or there should be a push to connect fitting to go from the outlet to the gauge, and then a barbed fitting to go from the other outlet to the torch. So the push to connect on the back should be the pressure gauge. So let's see if I can get you guys a better look at that. So that blue ring is your push to connect. The barb is down here at the bottom. And then for whatever reason, there's this ground bolt. So again, might have to read the manual for that, although I think I've got everything hooked up and it should be grounded through the power plug. So I'm not sure why you would need another ground, but okay, so that's mildly frustrating note. Looking at the assortment of connections they send with for the pneumatic side of things, there's some hose clamps, which is nice. There's two just brass barb fittings, like what's coming out of the back of the machine. So they want you to run this with a barb fitting from your compressor. I don't know that I know anyone who uses barb fittings off of a full-size compressor. I know people who use barb fittings on mini compressors for like airbrushes, but I don't know that I've ever seen someone use just barb fittings and hose clamps on a shop air compressor. Also, as a note, this push to connect 90 degree that the machine comes with does have a sealant already applied to the threads, so that should just thread in there. And I'm gonna have to go grab a set of wrenches. I'm also gonna grab a male quick disconnect, and hopefully I have the right size to fit our air inlet here. Also, just as a note, the moisture trap that this comes with is actually, I've been told, very important. Plasma cutters apparently really do not like any sort of moisture in the lines. So I do have a water trap on the main regulator at the tank. And eventually, once we get the shop more set up as our kind of final setup with the paint booth and the lift and everything, we are planning on installing an actual filter dryer setup that uses a desiccant to dry the air fully before it goes to the tools. So I think that'll be a good thing to have set up for this if we end up using it with any amount of frequency. So I'm gonna pause the recording for a sec. I'm gonna grab a couple things and then we'll be right back. We'll get the rest of the plumbing set up on this for the air and then we'll give it a try. All right, we're back. Couple things. Read through the manual a little bit. There's no discussion of what kind of pressure, air pressure to run this at, or air consumption rate, the CFM. So if you guys are interested in seeing that test of how big of a compressor do you actually need to run this thing, we can do that in a later video. I did figure out what at least the manual is telling me the blue wire and this red terminal are for. That's the pilot arc connection, and then the main power feed is through the torch, like I thought. According to the manual, again, because this is weird, semi-English, it's Chinese translation, the ground clamp is a positive ground, not a negative ground. So that's how that's set up. And it also says that that is a ground screw on the back, but there's nothing to hook up to it. So I'm not entirely sure what's up with that. I should check that size. The push to connect fitting on the back appears to be a 12 millimeter. Just to get that tightened up. Inlet does fit the push to connect fittings I have. I get these red Merlin 1/4 inch fittings from Harbor Freight as a pack. They're color coded and aluminum. So the red ones are the industrial style connection, quick connect, where it's like this very thin tapered triangular spur on the male side of the fitting. The blue couplers are considered the automotive coupler, but we already had a bunch of tools using the industrial style coupler, so we chose to stick with that style since they're not technically interchangeable. You can get some that are universal quick disconnects that work with both, but since we already had a ton that were the industrial, we stuck with those. And again, these do have a thread sealant on them already, although they're maybe not the highest quality thread sealant. So if we do have air leaks, that's the first place I'm gonna look, is everywhere that came with a pre-applied thread sealant. That seems like that's all right. I'm gonna see if I can tighten up these nuts on the back of the machine, because they are quite loose, and this air regulator is kind of just flopping around back here. So this would probably be a lot easier if I had not put the regulator in the bracket before trying to install the bracket. So if you do end up with one of these, I would actually probably recommend putting the bracket on first. Okay, that's better. Still not great. That's not a terribly strong bracket, and the only thing holding this regulator onto the bracket is a like nylon nut on top of the regulator. And I'm just gonna make sure that this regulator is backed out all the way before we hook air up to it. And now comes the fun part of doing Teflon tape on barb fittings, or on a barb fitting. Since we're not using the inlet barb fitting, we're only using the outlet barb fitting. I am gonna go ahead and use the Teflon tape that it came with, so I can tell you guys if that's any good or if that's trash. It is Teflon tape, and Teflon tape is not like a terribly complicated thing. So I don't foresee issues with it, but you never know. Initial thought is the Teflon tape they give you is maybe a little wider than what I'm used to for standard like plumbing Teflon tape, but the fitting they give you is very short. So the width of the tape is it's twice as wide as the height of the threads, if you can see that. Maybe not quite twice, but it's pretty close. So not the nicest setup for that. I feel like they're kind of setting you up for failure with your Teflon tape. And both my quick disconnect coupler and the barb fitting are a 14 millimeter hex. So if you're wondering what tools you need to assemble this, I don't happen to have an SAE set right here next to me. But if you've got metric, it's 14 for those. It's an 8 millimeter for the nuts holding the regulator bracket to the unit, and then I believe it was an 11 millimeter. I think I said it earlier. No, it's 12 millimeter for the quick disconnect. So we're just gonna plumb up the quick disconnects real quick. And I'm not gonna cut these hoses, I don't think, so long as I can get them in here without them being too kinked for air to go through. You could cut them and make it a cleaner installation, but I can't really be bothered right now. Okay, that is very small. I'd rather not use my multi-tool screwdriver on this. Shocker, the hose clamps they give you are not the highest quality hose clamps, but they seem like they'll probably work. So I'm just gonna get them taut before I try to put this on the barb fitting. Maybe got a little too tight. There we go. Now let's say, originally when I was looking for a better way to cut this sheet metal, what I was going to get was a like a Beverly shear, a throatless shear, because Harbor Freight was carrying one of those for a while. That wasn't too unreasonable. I think it was around $70, $70 or $80 for a bench mount throatless shear. I could be wrong on the pricing, but that's what I'm remembering off the top of my head. And right when I finally kind of got to the point where I was sick of cutting this by hand, they stopped selling it. And so then I had to come up with a different one. And it's only February, and the mosquitoes are already back. The joys of living in the South. I don't know if you can hear it in the background, but there's a bunch of frogs outside there just going nuts. It is the first week of February, and it is already 70 degrees here. All right, I think that should be everything for setting this up. So I might take a break in the recording again and get a test piece set up, and we'll try cutting something. So. All right, so I've got our panel set up here. I've got the machine set up on the bench over here, so I can see it while I'm around the other side. There is an air leak, and I checked all my connections, and my connections seem to be fine. It seems like there's an internal air leak, so I may have to open this up at some point and try and fix that. But we're gonna go ahead and try it as it is out of the box and see how it goes. So I'm gonna hit the power switch here, and we've got lights. The display should be showing the electrical current. Yeah, let's see. There you go. So we're at 36 amps supposedly, even though the dial is showing 30. If I roll that all the way up, we're at 54 supposedly, and all the way down, we're at 19. So I'm gonna go right about in the middle. I've got it set to about 35 PSI. And I'm just gonna leave the delay as is at the 12 o'clock position, and we'll just see how it goes, because I don't really know what settings I should be running for this. Although 35 amps seems like it's probably pretty hot for some sheet steel, so I might actually roll that down to maybe 25. We'll just see how that goes. So I'm gonna chuck some light gloves on for some dexterity and a little protection, and roll my sleeves down. I do have a welding helmet. Again, I'm not sure what the shade should be set to, so I'm leaving it at arc welding, which is about shade 12. And we'll adjust from there. So let's see what $100 on Amazon gets you. And I'm actually gonna move this ground clamp over here so I'm not cutting over it. Well, I just shot a hole through the steel, so that's pretty good. Alright, I think that my amperage could maybe be a little hotter. My delays may be a little high. And my pressure could maybe be a little higher. Also, my cutting ability could use a lot of improvement. Also, this helmet is way too dark. I can't see a thing while that's running. So I'm gonna turn that down to a 10. We'll try it again. That looks better. I still can't see anything, so I'm gonna go to a 9. Actually, you know what? No, let's go to an 8. That should be the cutting mode, not the welding mode. I figured since this is basically just an electrical arc like welding is, it would probably be pretty stinking bright. And I think it is. It's not as bright as I thought it would be, so. So that's definitely working. What I'm discovering is I'm definitely going to need a straight edge guide for this, but 100% the $100 Amazon plasma cutter is working like a charm. Let me just disconnect the air real quick so we're not just listening to that leak. Definitely gonna have to fix that leak now. I wasn't gonna bother fixing it if the thing didn't actually work, but that cut. I mean, I'm horrible at this, but it did cut it. And I didn't even clean the metal first, so that's just off the shelf, mill scale and all. And it punched holes right through it. So I'd say for $100, that's pretty good. So with that, I think we're gonna call this a video. And if you guys liked it, let me know in the comments if you want to see the continuation of this is a little review of the S7 plasma cutter. I'll put a link in the description for it. Again, at the time of purchase, it was $100, and I spent my own money on it. We weren't sent this to give it a good review. But as someone who's never owned a plasma cutter, has wanted a plasma cutter for a long time, and just finally found the need to get one, and it was more of a need and less of a want. This is filling the role pretty well, given that we're mostly going to be cutting sheet metal with it, and at most I think we'll cut like 1/4-inch plate, so nothing too heavy gauge or too thick for it to cut. So I think for $100, everything you get with it, if you already own an air compressor and like maybe a welding helmet, although welding helmets have come down in price too, so you can get an auto darkening helmet at Harbor Freight for like $30 now. So if you already have the compressor and literally all you need is the cutter and the helmet, you really can't beat $100 for a plasma cutter that out of the box. Granted, it has an issue with an air leak. I'll see if I can get that fixed, and I'll update you guys on whether or not I get it fixed. But $100 out of the box. I mean, I've been out here for maybe 45 minutes and I'm already cutting with it. So I'm not sure you could beat that. So yeah, we'll leave it at that. If you want to see more, let me know, and we'll try and get that made. So appreciate you watching, and we'll see you on the next one.